sewer. The first thing Catherine noticed was not that her name had been omitted. It was that someone had scraped it away. 2 pale scars shone across the brass plate beneath the model of the Westleigh waterworks, bright as fresh cuts against the older metal. Around her, the drawing-room glowed with candlelight and polished confidence. Landowners admired the miniature sluice gates. A county magistrate praised the Duke's investment in progress. Sir Godfrey Henshaw accepted compliments with the solemn satisfaction of a man receiving tribute for his own genius. Catherine stood 3 feet from the table and looked at the space where her initials had once been fixed. She had drawn the first water table at Alderwick 3 winters earlier, after floodwater entered 6 tenant cottages and left a child sleeping above the kitchen, because the ground floor smelled of river mud. She had walked every mile of the lower meadow. She had measured the rise beneath the mill bridge with a marked cane. She had written the figures by candlelight while Roderick attended Parliament. And Godfrey laughed at what he called her little columns. Now the brass plate read, "Designed under the direction of Sir Godfrey Henshaw, with technical consultation by Mr. Pritchard, estate surveyor." Nothing remained of Catherine except the work itself. "An impressive improvement, Your Grace," Lord Benton said to Roderick across the room. "The overflow meadow alone may save half the valley." Roderick inclined his head. Tall, controlled, and dark in evening dress, he wore rank as naturally as other men wore gloves. "That is the intention." Catherine's gaze moved from him to the model. Every channel followed her field sketches. Every cottage line matched her survey. Even the shallow curve near the north bank, which Godfrey had once called feminine fussing, remained exactly as she had designed it. Millicent Vane appeared at Catherine's shoulder, with the silent certainty of someone who never doubted her welcome. Her silver-grey gown was severe enough to suggest good judgment and expensive enough to discourage contradiction. "You are very quiet," Millicent murmured. "I was reading the plate." "Were you?" Millicent's eyes rested upon the scraped brass. "I advised Sir Godfrey to simplify it. A duchess's name attached to an engineering model might invite unkind amusement." Catherine turned toward her. "My name was not simplified. It was removed." Millicent gave a soft sigh. "You must not mistake discretion for insult. Men of property are stubborn creatures. They prefer improvements to appear as though other men conceived them, and you prefer that I allow them the comfort. I prefer that Westleigh not become the subject of ridicule." The words were gentle. Their meaning was not. Catherine looked again at the model. A chain no longer than 8 inches hung beside the miniature main sluice. Small enamel markers identified the counterweights in sequence: W12, W13, W14, W15, W16. Then another marker, painted a deep cobalt blue, hung beneath the last, W17. Catherine's breath slowed. There had never been a 17th weight. She reached across the table. "What are you doing?" Millicent asked. Catherine lifted the cobalt tally between 2 fingers. It was heavier than the others. The enamel had been laid too thickly along one edge, as though someone had repainted it. "This number does not belong here." "It is a model," Millicent said. "Surely a decorative marker cannot threaten the county." Catherine turned the tally over. A thin, crescent crack ran across the back. Fresh blue dust clung to the hinge. This was attached to something before it was placed on the model. Godfrey's voice carried from behind her, "My dear Catherine, must every pleasant evening become an examination?" Several nearby conversations weakened. Not enough to create silence, enough to create attention. Godfrey approached with a wine-glass in one hand and an indulgent smile that had deceived people since his school days. He was Catherine's elder brother by 9 years and had spent most of them explaining her to others. "The sequence ends at 16. Catherine said. "Why is there a 17th tally?" Godfrey glanced at the marker. "A revision." "To which mechanism?" "The primary gate." The primary gate was balanced at 16. He smiled more broadly. It was until men with practical experience corrected the calculations. Catherine felt heat rise behind her ribs, but her voice remained level. "A heavier counterweight will delay closure when the river rises quickly." "You see," Godfrey addressed Lord Benton as though Catherine had offered entertainment, "my sister mistakes notation for operation. It is an understandable error when one studies drawings without standing beside machinery." Catherine had stood beside the machinery in sleet. Godfrey had visited the mill once, in June when the banks were dry, and servants had carried luncheon beneath a striped awning. "I stood beside it when the eastern gate jammed last February," she said. "You were in Brighton." A faint change passed across Godfrey's face. Millicent moved before he could answer. "Catherine, everyone knows how devoted you are to the tenants. That does not require you to master every bolt and chain. No, it required me to master the ones that failed." A few guests had stopped pretending not to listen. Catherine could feel their interest settling upon her shoulders. Society forgave a woman for being ignorant. It often forgave her for being charming. It rarely forgave her for being correct in public. Godfrey reached for the tally. "Give me that." Catherine shifted it out of his grasp. "Not until I know where W17 came from. It came from the revised specification. Show it to me." "This is neither the time nor the place." "Then why is the model here?" His smile vanished. "Because the Duke is presenting an improvement, not inviting his wife to cross-examine its makers." Catherine heard the insult beneath the family familiarity. Before she could answer, Roderick's voice cut through the space between them. "That is enough, Godfrey." He had crossed the room without haste, yet the men nearest the table stepped aside. His gaze moved first to Catherine's face, then to the tally in her hand, then to the brass plate. He saw the scraped lines. Catherine knew the moment he understood that something had been removed. His expression did not change, but his attention sharpened. "What happened to the plate?" he asked. Millicent answered smoothly. "A small alteration for the sake of formality." "Whose alteration?" "Mine," Godfrey said. "The original wording overstated informal contributions." Catherine looked at Roderick. She waited for him to ask what those contributions had been. Instead, he turned to the model. "And the marker?" "A technical revision," Godfrey replied. "Mr. Pritchard approved it." "Mr. Pritchard is not here," Catherine said. Roderick's eyes returned to her. For one brief second she saw uncertainty, not doubt in Godfrey, doubt in the room itself, as though its polished surfaces had shifted beneath him. He reached toward the tally. Catherine gave it to him. His thumb passed over the crack. "You believe this number is dangerous. I believe it should not exist. That is not the same answer. It is the only honest one until I see the revised weight table." Godfrey exhaled through his nose. "Roderick, with respect, Catherine has always had a taste for detail beyond its importance." Roderick looked at him. "You will not speak of the Duchess as though she were absent. It was a rebuke. It should have felt like protection. Instead, it felt incomplete." Catherine watched his fingers close around the cobalt marker. "The surveyor and Sir Godfrey have responsibility for the machinery," Roderick said to her. Allow them to answer for it tomorrow. The river will not wait for tomorrow if the weight has already been installed. Has it? He asked Godfrey. Not to my knowledge. Godfrey lied easily. Catherine knew it because he looked at Roderick rather than at the model. Roderick did not know it yet. That difference opened between husband and wife like a narrow channel cut by years of unasked questions. Then the matter can wait until morning, he said. Around them, conversation began again with visible relief. Millicent touched Catherine's sleeve. There, His Grace has settled it. Catherine lowered her eyes to the model. Something blue glinted against the dark carpet near the leg of the table. When Roderick had turned the marker, a second cobalt tally must have slipped from beneath the base. No one else had seen it fall. Catherine bent as though adjusting the hem of her gown and closed her fingers around the small enamel disc. The back was cracked in the same crescent shape. W17 had not been created for display. It had been copied. She straightened slowly. Across the room, Godfrey was already laughing at something Lord Benton had said. Millicent watched Catherine with calm satisfaction. Roderick still held the first tally, his face unreadable. Catherine slipped the second into her glove. There should have been 16 counterweights in the Westleigh system. Someone had made 2 markers for a 17th, one for the model, one for the machinery. By the time the first course was cleared, Catherine had confirmed 3 things. Godfrey was avoiding her eyes. Millicent had taken the seat nearest Roderick's right hand, where a duchess should have sat if the place cards had been arranged by custom rather than convenience, and the second cobalt tally was still hidden inside Catherine's glove, cold against her palm. The dining room at Westleigh House had been designed to make people feel small without appearing hostile. Portraits of dead Langfords watched from panelled walls. Silver reflected candlelight in disciplined rows. Every servant moved with such precision that even silence seemed part of the household order. Catherine had once admired that order. Tonight she saw how easily it could be used to make one person's exclusion appear natural. Lord Benton praised the proposed improvements to the lower meadow. Another guest asked Godfrey whether the new counterweight sequence would reduce winter maintenance. Godfrey answered with confidence, though he had never known the difference between a spillway and a drainage cut until Catherine had explained both. Roderick listened without interruption. He had placed the first cobalt tally beside his wineglass. He had not asked Catherine about it again. Millicent noticed Catherine looking. "You mustn't brood," she said softly. "It encourages people to imagine injury where none was intended." Catherine folded her hands beneath the table. Was the altered plate also unintended? Millicent's smile did not move. "You place too much weight upon recognition. Only when someone else removes it." Across the table, Godfrey raised his voice just enough to draw the company. His Grace has been generous in allowing family enthusiasm to shape the early stages of the project. Of course, once work reached the mechanical phase, professional judgment had to prevail. Catherine looked at him. Professional judgment produced a 17th counterweight. Conversation thinned. Roderick set down his glass. "Catherine," his tone was quiet, which made the warning clearer. "I asked that this wait until morning." "You asked because Sir Godfrey said the weight had not been installed." Godfrey leaned back. "I said not to my knowledge. That is not the same as saying it was not installed." A faint flush appeared along his collar. Millicent reached toward the papers beside her plate. "Perhaps this will settle the matter." She unfolded a single sheet and passed it to Roderick. Catherine recognized the handwriting at once. Her own. It was a field note written during the spring inspection, when the eastern channel had flooded after a fallen branch blocked the gate. Roderick read the first lines. His expression hardened. You recommended an additional wait. No. Catherine kept her voice steady. I recommended an emergency overflow release if the main gate failed. The note refers to supplemental balance. For the manual release arm, not the primary sluice. Godfrey gave a weary laugh. This is precisely the difficulty. Catherine writes in fragments, then objects when trained men interpret them. You copied one sentence from 6 pages, because the other 5 were speculation. Catherine turned to Roderick. Ask for the complete note. Millicent rested her fingertips on the table. I am afraid the remaining pages were misplaced during the transfer to the surveyor. Misplaced by whom? Must every household error become an accusation? Millicent asked. Roderick's gaze moved from Millicent to Godfrey, then back to Catherine. Did you authorize any alteration to the counterweight sequence? No. Did you recommend a 17th weight? No. Did you write this? I wrote the words. I did not give them the meaning being placed upon them. Godfrey shook his head. There, Roderick, you see the problem. Catherine felt every face at the table turn toward her without turning openly. Pity was beginning to gather. Pity was worse than disbelief because it let people feel kind while they dismissed her. The problem, she said, is that the model contains a copied tally for a component that should not exist, and no one here will answer where it came from. Roderick's jaw tightened. Enough. The word struck the table more sharply than a raised voice would have done. Catherine looked at him. Have you seen my original water tables? No. Have you seen the revised specification? Sir Godfrey has. That was not my question. One of the older guests lowered his eyes. Millicent's expression softened into practiced concern. Catherine, perhaps you are overtired. Catherine did not look at her. Roderick, have you seen either document? He held her gaze. For an instant, she believed he might answer honestly and let the room bear the discomfort of it. Then pride entered where trust should have been. The work has been reviewed by men qualified to judge it, and I am qualified only to be silent beside it. That is not what I said. No, you have been careful not to say it, Godfrey muttered. This is becoming unseemly. Catherine heard the word and understood its purpose. A man could steal credit, alter a design, and produce a dangerous mechanism. A woman became unseemly when she refused to let him do it politely. Roderick's eyes went cold. You will not continue this discussion at my table. Catherine's fingers closed around the hidden tally. The river will not respect your table. A small sound came from someone near the foot of the room. Not laughter. Alarm. Roderick rose. Everyone else became still. You may leave. The words were spoken without heat. That made them final. Catherine looked at him across the length of white linen, silver, crystal, and the years she had spent learning how little space she was permitted to occupy within his life. Millicent lowered her eyes, but satisfaction touched the corner of her mouth. Godfrey looked relieved. Roderick looked as though he expected Catherine to obey, withdraw, and return when the room had forgotten the insult. The table, Your Grace, Catherine asked, or the place beside you? Something shifted in his face. He had not expected the question. No one moved. The servants stood against the wall as if carved there. Roderick could have corrected himself. He could have said the dining room. He could have said they would speak privately. He could have said her name. Instead, he hesitated. It lasted no more than 2 breaths. It was enough. Catherine removed her left glove. The wedding ring caught the candlelight. She had worn it for 7 years. It had once felt heavy because of what it promised. Later, it had felt heavy because of what it failed to mean. She slipped it from her finger. Roderick watched the movement with sudden disbelief. Catherine walked around the table. No one stopped her. When she reached him, she placed the ring in his open palm and closed his fingers over it. Then keep the promise whose meaning you have chosen without me. His hand tightened. Catherine. It was the first time that evening he had spoken her name as though it belonged to a person rather than a difficulty. She met his eyes. You told me I may leave. I meant this room. You were given the chance to say so. He looked at the ring inside his fist. Do not turn anger into a decision you cannot recall. I am not angry. That was the truth. Anger would have been warmer. I am finished waiting for you to decide when my voice deserves to exist. Millicent rose halfway from her chair. Catherine, don't make a spectacle of yourself. Catherine turned to her. The spectacle was prepared before I entered the room. Godfrey's face paled. Roderick stepped forward, but Catherine moved back before he could reach for her. Tomorrow, she said, you may examine the machinery. Tonight, you may explain to your guests why the Duchess, whose work they praised, has left your table without her ring. She walked out beneath the portraits of women whose names had survived only because they had married men important enough to preserve them. In her bedchamber, she packed 1 trunk. She took no Langford jewels. She took her field books, her correspondence, 2 practical gowns, and the 2nd cobalt tally. Her maid, Anne, asked no questions until the carriage stood ready in the dark courtyard. Briarcombe, your grace? Yes? Catherine looked once toward the upper windows. No figure appeared. Lady Marjorie will receive us. The carriage rolled away after midnight. Catherine did not look back. At dawn, 3 counties away from any drawing room, a messenger reached Roderick at Westleigh House. The counterweight at Westleigh Mill had been replaced during the night. The new iron casting bore a single mark in blue enamel, W17. The messenger found Roderick in the breakfast room, with Catherine's wedding ring still in his waistcoat pocket. He had not slept. The house had settled around him after her departure. But nothing in it felt orderly now. Her chair at dinner remained in the same position. The brass model had been covered with a linen cloth. Godfrey had retired early with a headache. Millicent had sent a note advising calm. Roderick had read none of it twice. The messenger stood near the door, mud drying on his boots. The casting was changed sometime after midnight, Your Grace. Mr. Pritchard says the chain now carries W17. Roderick rose so quickly that his coffee struck the saucer. Was the mill running? Not when I left. The men were waiting for instruction. Good. Send word ahead that no one touches the gate, the chain, or the weight. He reached for his coat. Have the carriage brought at once. By the time he arrived at Westleigh Mill, morning mist still lay over the lower meadow. The water moved beneath the bridge with a dull, heavy sound. It had rained in the north during the night, though the sky above Alderwick had remained clear. Roderick saw at once why Catherine had objected. A black cast-iron counterweight hung beside the primary sluice, newly fitted, and still marked with chalk along one edge. A small blue enamel plate had been bolted to its face, W17. Mr. Pritchard, the estate surveyor, stood near the chain with 2 labourers and the miller Amos Bell. His gloves were dark with grease. No one has moved it since dawn, Your Grace. Roderick stepped closer. The new weight was larger than the others by several inches. Who authorized the replacement? Pritchard hesitated. The revised specification came through Sir Godfrey's office. Did you approve it? I approved an adjustment to the manual arm. Not this. Roderick turned. Then why is it here? The instruction bore my initials. Were they yours? Pritchard's face tightened. They resembled mine. Amos Bell removed his cap. Begging pardon, Your Grace. But the wagon came after 11. Sir Godfrey's clerk said the work couldn't wait. Did you see the clerk? No, Your Grace. The driver carried the paper. Roderick looked at the chain. Catherine had warned him before an entire table of witnesses, and he had treated precision as defiance. Show me the original drawings. Pritchard glanced toward the mill office. The final mechanical plans are there. The earliest tables are not. Where are they? Her Grace retained them. The answer landed harder than it should have. Roderick had spent 7 years assuming Catherine's papers were domestic notes, lists, charitable accounts, observations gathered to occupy a clever mind. Now men who worked machinery for a living stood waiting for figures only she possessed. Stop all work, he said. No testing, no removal, no alteration. Godfrey's voice came from behind him. That is unnecessary. He approached from the road on horseback, immaculate despite the wet ground. Millicent's younger footman rode several yards behind him. Roderick watched Godfrey dismount. You were told not to come near the machinery. I was told nothing. I came because this panic is becoming absurd. Godfrey gestured toward the weight. The casting was commissioned weeks ago. By whom? By the contractor. On whose authority? Mine if you require a name. Catherine said the system ended at 16. Godfrey's expression changed only slightly. Catherine sketched a preliminary concept. This is the completed design. Why was her name scraped from the model? Because sentiment has no place on a technical plate. That was not my question. Godfrey looked past him toward Pritchard. You approved the revision. Pritchard did not answer. Roderick took one step closer to Godfrey. You will leave the mill. You will send me every specification, invoice, and instruction connected to W17 before noon. Until I have them, you have no authority over this project. Roderick, don't be theatrical. Do not mistake restraint for uncertainty. Godfrey's jaw tightened. He mounted without another word, but his eyes moved once toward the new weight. Not with pride. With calculation, Roderick waited until he was gone, then entered the mill office. The brass model from Westleigh House had been sent ahead for comparison. Its linen covering lay folded on a chair. He pulled the cloth away and examined the plate. In daylight, the damage was worse. 2 small screw holes marked where another strip of brass had once been fixed. Faint engraving remained beneath the scratches. C.L. Roderick stared at the initials. Catherine Langford. Pritchard stood behind him. Her Grace made the first field measurements herself. Roderick turned slowly. How much of the design was hers? The overflow meadow, the secondary channel, the cottage diversion, most of the water table. Why was I not told? Pritchard looked uncomfortable. I believed you knew. Roderick nearly laughed, but there was nothing amusing in the answer. He had not known because he had never asked. A servant could have told him which guests Catherine preferred at dinner. A secretary could have told him how many letters she sent each week, yet no one in his house had thought it remarkable that the Duchess had studied a river for 3 years because the Duke had treated her work as an elegant distraction. Send a man to Briarcombe, he said. Ask whether Her Grace will receive a letter. Ask, Pritchard repeated before he could stop himself. Roderick looked at him. Yes, ask. At Briarcombe Dower House, Catherine stood before the breakfast-room window with the second cobalt tally in one hand and her field book open beneath the other. Lady Marjorie Pike sat nearby, reading letters with the patience of a woman who considered urgency a form of vanity. She had welcomed Catherine before dawn, ordered a room prepared, and asked only whether she needed a physician. Catherine had said no. Marjorie had replied, "Then you need tea and a locked door." Now the tally rested beside a column of figures. Catherine measured its diameter with a folding rule. The number W17 had been stamped over an older mark, not cast with it. Someone had created the identity after the component itself. "You have been awake for 24 hours, Marjorie said. 22. "That correction proves my point." Catherine turned a page. "The new weight is not merely heavier. If the pivot sits where I think it does, the gate will close several seconds too late under a fast rise." "How many seconds?" "Enough." Anne entered with a sealed letter on a tray. "A rider from Westleigh, Your Grace." Catherine looked at the black wax. She did not reach for it at once. Marjorie watched her over the rim of her spectacles. "You are permitted to read a letter without forgiving the writer." Catherine broke the seal. Roderick's message was brief. W17 had been installed. Work was stopped. He requested the original tables and asked whether Catherine would receive him at a time of her choosing. There was no command to return, no accusation, no mention of the ring. Catherine read it twice. "He stopped the work," she said. Marjorie set down her letter. "That is sensible. It is late. Late sense is still more useful than early pride." Catherine folded Roderick's note. "The tables are not enough. I need to see the downstream markers." She crossed to the wall map and traced the river toward the tenant cottages. If someone intends to alter the system, the damage will not begin at the mill. It will begin where no guest at Westleigh House ever looks. Then you will not go alone. I had no intention of doing so. Catherine asked Anne to prepare her plain wool gown and send for Mr. Hale, Marjorie's local steward. She would inspect the lower channel with witnesses, record every measurement, and send copies to 3 separate places. She would not allow anyone to call her memory uncertain again. Before leaving the room, she compared the cobalt tally with the written sequence one final time. 16 counterweights, 1 invented number, 1 duplicate marker. Outside, the river pressed steadily against its banks. By noon, Catherine stood beside a flood post half a mile below the mill and found fresh hammer marks in the wood. The old high water line had been covered with dark paint. A new line had been cut nearly 4 inches higher. Someone was not only changing the machinery, someone was preparing to change the truth about how high the water had always risen. The paint on the flood post was still tacky beneath Catherine's thumb. Someone had raised the recorded high water mark by nearly 4 inches, enough to make future flooding appear ordinary and old warnings seem exaggerated. She wiped the dark stain onto a handkerchief and handed the post to Mr. Hale, Lady Marjorie's steward, who examined the fresh cut with a frown. "This wasn't done by weather," he said. "No," Catherine replied. "It was done by someone who expects the river to rise and wants the record prepared before it does." Anne stood a few yards away beside the carriage, her cloak pulled tight against the damp air. Beyond the post, the lower meadow sloped toward a cluster of tenant cottages. Smoke lifted from their chimneys. From this distance, they looked peaceful. Catherine knew how quickly that illusion could disappear. She walked toward the old overflow channel, following the line of flattened reeds. The channel had once cut a shallow path through the meadow before curving toward a gravel bed downstream. It was meant to take excess water away from the cottages when the main sluice could not close fast enough. Now mud and broken brush had been packed into the entrance. Someone had worked carefully. The obstruction looked natural until one noticed the straight edges beneath the reeds. Hale pushed the end of his cane into the bank. It struck timber. There's a beam under this. Catherine crouched and pulled aside a mat of wet grass. A squared wooden brace had been driven across the channel mouth, then covered with sod. This was not done by flood debris, she said. It was constructed. By whose order? Anne asked. Catherine looked toward the mill, half a mile upstream. That is what we will learn. A cart rattled along the lane behind them. Amos Bell, the tenant miller, sat on the front board with his cap pulled low. When he saw Catherine, he slowed the horse. His expression changed from surprise to unease. Your Grace, Catherine rose. Mr. Bell, I need to ask you about the secondary sluice. Amos glanced at Hale and Anne, then toward the road leading to the mill. I don't know much beyond my own wheel. You know whether the overflow channel was open last winter. It was. And now? His grip tightened on the reins. Closed. By whom? Amos swallowed. Sir Godfrey's men. When? 3 weeks ago. Catherine kept her voice calm. Why did you not report it? I did. To whom? Mr. Pritchard first, then Sir Godfrey's clerk. I was told the channel was obsolete and made the meadow unsightly. Catherine looked at the cottages again. Did you sign anything? Only the maintenance sheet. Was it complete when you signed it? Amos hesitated. That was answer enough. Mr. Bell, Catherine said, I am not asking to place blame upon you. I am asking because someone has altered the flood marks, blocked the emergency channel, and installed a weight that should not exist. His face lost color. The new weights on the main chain? Yes. Then it will drag. How much? I can't say. But the gate was slow even before. A horse approached at speed from the direction of Alderwick. Amos looked over Catherine's shoulder and removed his cap. Roderick drew rein near the channel. Mr. Pritchard rode behind him. The Duke dismounted before the groom could reach his stirrup. His coat was damp at the shoulders, and mud marked one boot. Catherine had rarely seen him arrive anywhere without the appearance of complete control. Today, he looked like a man who had discovered that control had been built upon missing information. His gaze moved over the blocked channel, the altered flood post, and Amos's strained face. Then it settled upon Catherine. You found something. Several things. She did not call him Roderick. She did not call him Your Grace. The absence of address stood between them more sharply than formality would have done. Pritchard examined the timber brace beneath the sod. This channel was meant to remain clear. Amos nodded. Sir Godfrey's clerk said it wasn't needed. Roderick looked at him. You will write down exactly what was said, and who delivered the order. Yes, Your Grace. No one will remove you from the mill or threaten your tenancy for doing so. Amos glanced at Catherine before answering. Thank you, Your Grace. Roderick turned to the flood post. Catherine handed him the stained handkerchief, fresh paint. The original mark is beneath it. He looked at the dark smear, then at the higher cut. Prepared evidence. Prepared history, Catherine said. If the river rises after W17 is installed, this mark makes the danger appear normal. Pritchard straightened slowly. That means someone expects failure. Or intends it, Catherine said. Roderick's expression hardened. We inspect the mechanism now. They returned to the mill together, though Catherine kept several feet between them. At the main sluice, the new counterweight hung motionless beside the chain. The river pressed against the gate with a low, steady force. Pritchard brought out the revised specification. Catherine unfolded her original tables beside it on a workbench. The difference was obvious. Her design called for 16 balanced weights and a manual release arm. The revision added W17 directly to the primary chain. "The pivot is wrong," she said. She traced the altered line with one finger. The additional weight should not sit this far from the hinge. Roderick leaned closer. "What happens if it does?" "The gate closes later under a sudden rise. The river gains force before the mechanism answers. Then we remove it." "Not yet." His eyes lifted to hers. "Why not?" "Because if the chain is under uneven strain, releasing the weight without securing the gate may cause the arm to swing." Pritchard studied the housing. "She's right." The words were simple. Their effect was not. Roderick stepped back at once. "Tell me what is required." Catherine looked at the workers nearby. "Clear the platform. Secure the gate from both sides. Loosen the lower coupling before touching the upper chain. No one stands beneath the arm." Roderick turned to the men. "Do exactly as Her Grace directs." There was no hesitation, no correction added afterward. Catherine moved to the side of the housing and watched the labourers place the braces. Roderick remained where she had told him to stand. When one man reached too quickly for the upper link, Roderick stopped him with a raised hand. "Wait for the Duchess." Catherine nodded once. "Now." The coupling shifted with a heavy click. Blue dust fell from the chain and settled across the iron plate beneath it. Catherine bent close, without touching it. The colour matched the cobalt tally inside her pocket. "This marker was attached here," she said. The enamel rubbed against the link. Pritchard peered at the metal. Then the model tally was not merely copied from a drawing. No, it was copied from this mechanism. Roderick looked at the chain, then at Catherine. "You were right." She held his gaze. "About the weight. About more than the weight." The apology was near. She could hear it in the restraint of his voice. She did not rescue him from having to say it. Roderick glanced toward the workers, then toward the open mill yard. "I should have examined the documents before I judged you." Catherine folded her tables. "Yes, I should not have allowed your name to be removed." "No, and I should not have spoken to you as I did." "No." The word left her softly. It carried more weight than anger. He took the scraped brass plate from inside his coat and held it out. "This belongs to you." Catherine did not take it. "It belonged on the model. I will have it restored." Privately, his hand remained extended. "No." For the first time since dinner, something inside her eased, though not enough to be called trust. "Then restore it where it was erased." He lowered the plate. "Will you continue the inspection?" "For the cottages." "Not for Westleigh. The cottages are Westleigh. The difference is that they cannot afford your mistakes." The words struck him, but he did not defend himself. He only nodded. "What do you need?" "Independent records. Copies kept away from your household. Access to every instruction Godfrey issued, and no one removes this weight until I say it is safe." "You shall have all of it." Catherine looked at him. "Do not promise what you have not yet enforced." Roderick turned immediately to Pritchard. "Duplicate every specification and send one copy to Briarcombe, one to my solicitor in London, and one to the county office. No document leaves your custody without a written receipt." Pritchard inclined his head. "At once, Your Grace." Catherine saw then that Roderick could listen when he chose. The danger was that he had spent years choosing too late. A shout came from the yard. They turned together. Amos Bell had been waiting near the stable wall, but the place where he had stood was empty. His cart remained beside the lane. His horse was still tied to the rail. On the ground lay his cap, damp with mist. Pritchard ran toward the road and looked both ways. He couldn't have gone far. Catherine walked to the cart. The maintenance sheet Amos had carried was missing from beneath the seat. Roderick's voice became quiet. Someone heard what he intended to say. Catherine looked toward the blocked channel and the river beyond it, or someone was waiting to make certain he never wrote it down. Amos Bell had not vanished. He had left in fear. Catherine understood that before the first search rider returned, his cart remained at the mill. His horse had not been taken. And there were no signs of a struggle near the stable wall. A frightened man, leaving under his own power, would choose the footpath or the canal road. A man taken against his will would leave confusion behind. Amos had left intention. Roderick ordered 6 men to search the immediate grounds, but Catherine stopped him before he sent more. "You're looking too close." He turned toward her. "His cap is here," which means he wanted us to think he disappeared here. Pritchard looked from the abandoned cart to the canal lane. Why would he do that? Catherine opened the cart box. The maintenance sheet was gone, but a strip of coarse wrapping paper remained beneath the seat. It carried a dark smear of axle grease and one line of blue chalk. "Because he believed someone was watching him," she said. Roderick stepped nearer. "And you think he planned a route?" The old counterweights were moved by barge. If Amos wanted to follow the supply chain without being seen on the main road, he would take the canal path. Pritchard nodded. "There's an inn near Lower Beck where the bargemen stop." Roderick looked toward the stable. "I'll send men ahead." "No." Catherine folded the wrapping paper and placed it in her reticule. "Too many riders will frighten him farther away. He may be in danger. Then we should not arrive like a pursuit." Roderick's jaw tightened. Once, he would have given the order and expected the world to rearrange itself around his certainty. Now he held the command behind his teeth. "What do you propose?" "1 carriage. Mr. Hale with us. Pritchard remains here and secures the mill. No one tells Godfrey where we are going. And if Bell refuses to speak, then he refuses." Roderick studied her face. "You would let the only witness walk away?" "I would let him choose whether his word belongs to him." The answer did not please him, but he nodded. "Very well." They left within 15 minutes. Lady Marjorie's carriage was still near the mill, and Catherine chose it over the Duke's faster vehicle. Roderick said nothing about the choice. He sat opposite her, one hand resting on his knee, the other closed around nothing. Catherine knew the ring was not there. He had left it somewhere private, perhaps in his desk, perhaps in the pocket nearest his heart. She refused to wonder which. The canal road ran for nearly 4 miles through wet fields and sparse woodland. Catherine watched the towpath while Hale questioned a gatekeeper about barge traffic. A coal barge had passed before dawn, so had a smaller freight boat carrying iron scrap and 2 passengers. One passenger matched Amos's build. The inn at Lower Beck stood beside a narrow stone bridge, its sign creaking above the door. Catherine entered first with Hale. Roderick followed several steps behind, close enough to protect, far enough not to turn the room into an audience for ducal authority. Amos sat in a corner beneath a window, his hands wrapped around a cup he had not touched. He looked up and nearly rose. "Your Grace?" Catherine took the chair across from him. "You left your horse." "I know. Your wife will be worried." His face tightened. "She doesn't know where I am." "Then we should begin with that." She asked the innkeeper for paper and wrote a short note in Amos's name stating only that he was safe and would return before nightfall if he could. Amos signed it. Hale sent a boy toward the mill cottages. Only after the message had gone did Catherine ask, "Who frightened you?" Amos looked toward Roderick. Roderick remained near the hearth. "You may answer her grace," he said. "I'm not here to put words in your mouth." Amos lowered his gaze. "Sir Godfrey's clerk came to me 2 nights ago. He said the new weight had proper approval. He told me to sign a maintenance sheet so wages could be released." "Was the sheet complete?" Catherine asked. "No. Why did you sign it?" "Because 6 men hadn't been paid for a fortnight." Shame moved across his face. "I thought it was only a delay in the office." "And afterward?" "The clerk said I'd be held responsible if anything went wrong. He said the Duke wouldn't protect a tenant against his own family." Roderick went still. Catherine saw the words land, but she did not soften them for him. "Did the clerk name Godfrey?" she asked. "No, he didn't need to." Amos reached inside his coat and withdrew a folded note. "This came yesterday." Catherine opened it. The message offered Amos £40 and passage north if he left Kent before giving evidence. No signature appeared, but the paper bore the watermark of Godfrey's London stationer. "Why did you not take the money?" Roderick asked. Amos looked at him directly for the first time. "I almost did." His honesty changed the room. "Then I thought of the cottages. If that gate failed, and I'd gone, everyone would say the miller knew and ran." Catherine placed the note on the table. "You were afraid?" "Yes, Your Grace. Fear is not guilt." Amos gave a short, humorless laugh. "It feels close enough when a gentleman tells you your house belongs to him." Roderick moved from the hearth. "Your tenancy will not be touched. Your wages will be paid today, the men's wages as well." Amos glanced at Catherine before answering. "Begging pardon, Your Grace, but I don't want payment for speaking." "Nor should you." Catherine turned to Roderick. "The wages are already owed. They are not a reward." He understood the correction immediately. "They will be paid because they are owed," he said. "Your statement remains yours." Amos's shoulders lowered slightly. Catherine asked him to describe the night the weight arrived. He remembered the wagon had come from the West Road, not the Foundry Road. The driver wore no company badge. The clerk carried a blank sheet with Pritchard's initials already copied at the bottom. Amos had signed beneath a line that read maintenance acknowledgement. The rest had been empty. "And the sheet you carried today?" Catherine asked. "A copy of my signature. I took it from the mill office after dawn." "Where is it now?" Amos looked toward the door. "Gone." He explained that a man followed him along the canal. Amos hid beneath a loading platform until the man passed. But the sheet slipped from his coat into the water. He had watched the ink spread before he could reach it. Roderick's expression hardened. "Did you recognize the man?" "No, but his boots had grey clay on them, not river mud. Building clay." Hale spoke from beside the window. "The new icehouse foundation at Alderwick uses grey clay." Catherine felt the pattern narrow. Godfrey's men had access to the icehouse, the mill, and the supply wagons. Millicent had access to the household records and Catherine's notes. They did not yet have proof of cooperation, but they had alignment. "You will return with us," Catherine told Amos. "Not as a prisoner, as a witness." He hesitated. "And my wife?" "She will meet you at the mill," Roderick added. "No one will question her without her grace present." Catherine looked at him. The protection was useful. More importantly, he had placed her authority inside it. They left the inn before noon. Outside, the canal wind pulled at Catherine's bonnet ribbons. Roderick offered his hand at the carriage step. She looked at it. then placed her gloved fingers lightly in his. He did not close his grip. He only steadied her until she was seated. On the return journey, Amos rode with Hale. Catherine and Roderick sat opposite one another again. "You were right not to send riders," he said. "He would have run farther. Yes, you might occasionally allow a man the dignity of not hearing that word. Then do not give me so many chances to use it." A shadow of something almost warm touched his face, then disappeared. At the mill, Anne waited beside Amos's wife, Mary. Relief broke across Mary's features when the carriage stopped. Catherine stepped down and went to her first. "He is safe." Mary gripped her hands. "Thank you, Your Grace." "He chose to come back." Catherine made certain Amos heard it. Later, when the mill office was secured, Pritchard brought them a new document. It had been delivered by messenger while they were away. At the bottom appeared Amos Bell's true signature. Above it, in carefully copied handwriting, stood an order authorizing the installation of W17. The order carried Catherine's name, not merely her initials. Catherine, Duchess of Westleigh. Roderick read the false line once, then again. "They are no longer trying to discredit your warning," he said. Catherine looked toward the river. "No, they are preparing to make the danger mine." By late afternoon, the false order had reached more people than the truth. Godfrey had sent a copy to the County Agricultural Committee with a formal note expressing concern for the safety of the Westleigh improvements. Millicent had written to 2 women in London whose concern for propriety travelled faster than any railway timetable. Before sunset, Catherine's warning about W17 had been transformed into a story in which an estranged duchess had interfered with machinery, frightened tenants, and forced the Duke into a public quarrel. Catherine read the committee's request for explanation in Lady Marjorie's morning room at Briarcombe. The letter was polite. That made it worse. Politeness could conceal a verdict more efficiently than cruelty. "They've already accepted the document as genuine," Marjorie said. Catherine placed the letter beside the cobalt tally and her field notes. "They've accepted that the signature is genuine." "Is it? Amos's is. Mine is copied. Can you prove that?" "Not yet." Marjorie watched her with steady grey eyes. "Then what can you prove?" Catherine looked toward the rain-dark window. "That the meadow will flood if the secondary channel remains closed." A messenger from the mill had arrived before breakfast, with measurements from the upstream gauge. The river had risen 5 inches overnight. Another storm had crossed the northern hills. Water would continue moving south for hours, perhaps longer. Catherine unfolded a rough map of the fete grounds. The Westleigh Agricultural Fete was scheduled for the next morning on the ornamental meadow below Alderwick Hall. Hundreds of guests were expected. There would be livestock pens, demonstration tents, carriage lanes, and a temporary footbridge across the narrow channel. The committee had spent weeks arranging it. They would not surrender the event easily. "Roderick must move the fete," she said. Marjorie lifted one brow. "You are still calling him Roderick in private." Catherine did not answer. The name had not become less familiar, because the marriage had become more uncertain. It had only become more dangerous. A carriage sounded in the drive. Minutes later, Roderick entered the morning room with Mr. Pritchard and a leather case of documents. He had asked permission before coming. Marjorie received him with perfect courtesy and no warmth. "Your Grace." "Lady Marjorie." His gaze found Catherine immediately. "The committee meets at Alderwick in 1 hour." Catherine rose. "Then we should not waste it." Roderick placed the leather case on the table. Godfrey has submitted the false order as evidence that you authorized W17. I know. He also claims you instructed Amos to alter the release sequence. Amos will deny it. He will, but the committee may still suspend him. Catherine looked at Pritchard. And you? They may suspend me as well, Your Grace. Because your initials appear on the revision. Yes. Catherine gathered her notes. Then we will give them something more urgent than reputations to consider. The committee assembled in Alderwick Hall's west salon, where long windows overlooked the meadow selected for the fete. Rain had not yet begun there, and the grounds appeared deceptively dry. 6 county landowners sat around a mahogany table. Godfrey stood near the fireplace. Millicent occupied a chair behind him, dressed in quiet brown as though she had come to mourn good judgment. Catherine entered with Roderick, Lady Marjorie, Pritchard, and Amos. Conversation stopped. The chairman, Sir Thomas Vale, rose. Your Grace, Duchess. His hesitation before the second title was slight but audible. Catherine took a seat without waiting to be placed. Roderick sat beside her, not at the head of the table. That, too, was noticed. Sir Thomas lifted the false order. We have a serious difficulty. This document appears to direct the installation of W17 under Her Grace's authority. Catherine answered before Godfrey could. It directs nothing. It was written above a signature, Amos Bell, placed on a blank maintenance sheet. Godfrey gave a restrained sigh. That accusation lacks proof. So does your claim that I wrote it. The handwriting resembles yours. Resemblance is not authorship. Millicent folded her hands. Catherine, no one wishes to embarrass you. If you were distressed when you gave the instruction, perhaps the committee might consider the circumstances. Catherine looked at her. You mean my separation from the Duke? I mean that strong emotion can affect judgment. Then, we should examine yours as carefully as mine. Sir Thomas cleared his throat. We are not here to discuss private matters. Private matters were introduced when my marriage was offered as an explanation for forged instructions, Catherine said. Roderick's voice followed hers. Her Grace is correct. The document must stand or fall upon evidence, not upon speculation about her temperament. Godfrey turned toward him. You cannot deny that Catherine has made contradictory recommendations. I can deny that you have shown the complete notes. The missing pages are unfortunate. The missing pages are convenient, Roderick said. Silence tightened around the table. Catherine opened her field book. There is a more immediate question. The river has risen 5 inches since midnight. Upstream reports indicate continued flow. The fete ground lies below the main sluice and above the tenant cottages. If the secondary channel remains blocked, the ornamental meadow will take water first. If W17 delays the main gate, the cottages may take it next. One committee member frowned. The meadow has hosted events for 20 years. Not with the emergency channel closed. Godfrey leaned forward. This is alarmism. Surface water after northern rain is common. Catherine turned the map toward them. Surface water does not reverse the mill wheel. A pressure rise does. Sir Thomas studied the map. What do you recommend? Move the fete to the upper pasture and open the secondary channel before dawn. The room reacted at once. One man complained about the livestock pens. Another mentioned the carriage approach. A third said invitations had named the lower meadow. Godfrey let the objections gather before speaking. Moving the event now would create panic and ridicule. It would imply the Duke has lost confidence in his own improvements. Catherine looked at Roderick. There it is. What? Sir Thomas asked. The actual measure being protected, not the cottages. not the guests. His grace did not flinch. "Move the fate," he said. Godfrey's head turned sharply. "You cannot be serious." "I am." Sir Thomas shifted in his chair. "Your Grace, hundreds of arrangements have already been made." "Then remake them." The firmness in Roderick's voice almost settled the room. Almost. Godfrey drew the false order from the table. Before the committee abandons its plans, perhaps it should consider that the person urging relocation may have authorized the very mechanism she now condemns. Catherine felt the trap close. If the fate moved and nothing happened, Godfrey would call her unstable. If it remained and the meadow flooded, he would claim she caused it. Roderick saw it too. "We open the emergency channel tonight," Catherine said. "Then the question of motive becomes irrelevant." Godfrey shook his head. "Opening it will ruin the lawn and soften the carriage road. You would destroy tomorrow's event to prove your own prediction. I would damage grass to protect homes. There is no evidence the homes are threatened." Amos spoke from the wall. "There will be if the gate drags." Every face turned toward him. "I've worked that mill 12 years. If the main chain holds and the side channel stays shut, the water will go where it can." Millicent's voice was gentle. "Mr. Bell, you signed the maintenance order." "I signed a blank sheet because men hadn't been paid." "How convenient that you remember differently now." Amos's hands tightened. Catherine saw shame threaten to silence him. "He has nothing to gain by speaking," she said. "He has everything to lose." Sir Thomas looked toward the windows. "The sky is clear." Catherine rose and walked to the nearest pane. Far beyond the meadow, the mill wheel turned steadily. Then it faltered. One dark blade moved backward against the current before resuming its course. Catherine's pulse changed. "There," she said. Roderick came to the window. "What?" The wheel reversed. Godfrey laughed once. "From this distance, I know its rhythm." She turned from the glass. "The pressure is already wrong." Roderick looked at Sir Thomas. "The fate moves." The chairman hesitated. "By morning, perhaps we may know more." Catherine stared at him. "By morning, the guests will already be arriving." Roderick's expression hardened, but the committee began arguing over logistics, authority, and cost. The decision dissolved into delay. Finally, Sir Thomas proposed a compromise. The committee would inspect the meadow at dawn. Until then, no public announcement would be made. Roderick objected. Godfrey supported the delay with calculated calm. In the end, Roderick had the rank to cancel the event, but not the willingness to override every man in the room without further proof. Catherine saw the old weakness beneath the new effort. He believed her, but he still wanted the room to permit his belief. Outside the salon, he caught up with her in the gallery. "I will order the channel opened before midnight." "Then why didn't you say so in there?" "Because I need the committee to cooperate." "No, you need them to approve." "That is not the same thing." "It becomes the same thing when water is rising." He lowered his voice. "I am trying to prevent panic. Decide whether you trust the river or the room." She left him standing beneath the portraits. That night, at Briarcombe, Catherine placed the cobalt tally in the locked drawer of Anne's writing desk and made a careful sketch of the crescent crack. Before dawn, Anne woke her with a pale face and an empty hand. The desk had been opened without damage. The tally was gone. From across the valley came the mill bell. Once, twice, 3 times. High water. The third bell was still echoing when Catherine reached the lower meadow. Dawn had scarcely broken. Yet the Westleigh agricultural fete was already coming to life beneath a sky the color of wet slate. Servants raised striped awnings. Stable boys led restless horses toward the temporary pens. Carriages began to arrive along the east road, their wheels cutting dark grooves into the softened ground. No public announcement had been made. The committee had delayed, and the guests had come. Catherine stepped down from Lady Marjorie's carriage before the groom had fully lowered the step. Anne followed with her cloak gathered tightly. Hale rode behind them. From the mill came a deeper sound than the bell, a heavy mechanical groan that travelled through the damp air. Catherine looked toward the wheel. It turned once, slowed, then moved backward by half a blade. "The pressure's already against the gate," she said. Hale's face tightened. "Can it hold?" Not with W17 dragging the chain. Across the meadow, Godfrey stood beneath the largest marquee, speaking to Sir Thomas Vale as though nothing were wrong. Millicent moved among the arriving ladies with serene efficiency, directing servants and accepting praise for preserving the event, despite what she called unfortunate domestic agitation. Roderick was near the temporary footbridge, arguing with two committee members. He saw Catherine and left them at once. Mud darkened the edge of his coat. "The Channel crew went out before midnight," he said. "They found the release arm locked." "Locked by whose order?" "No order of mine." "And the key?" "Missing." Catherine looked toward the cottages beyond the lower bank. "Then we open it manually." Sir Thomas approached with Godfrey at his side. "Your Grace, before anyone destroys the grounds, we should establish whether the river is truly beyond normal measure." Catherine turned to him. "The flood marker was altered." "So you claim." Godfrey's expression carried grave concern. "And the cobalt tally has disappeared from Briarcombe." Catherine met his eyes. "You know it disappeared quickly." A brief silence followed. Godfrey recovered at once. Millicent received a note before dawn. Apparently Lady Marjorie's staff reported a theft. No one at Briarcombe sent such a note. Millicent joined them, her gloved hands folded. "Catherine, don't let suspicion overcome reason. We are all trying to protect Westleigh." Catherine looked beyond her toward the mill. The wheel reversed again. This time, the movement lasted longer. "Then begin by moving the guests." Sir Thomas frowned. "The water has not reached the tents." "It will." "Your Grace," one committee member called to Roderick. "The livestock judges are ready." Another carriage rolled onto the meadow. Guests stepped down beneath umbrellas, unaware that the river had begun pressing against the hidden side of the celebration. Roderick looked at Catherine. "How long?" "Minutes, perhaps half an hour. I can't be exact without seeing the gate." Godfrey gave a quiet laugh. "There. Even she admits uncertainty." Catherine did not look at him. "Uncertainty is why sensible men move people before they are forced to." Roderick turned to the nearest steward. "Clear the footbridge. Move the carriages to the upper road. Begin taking guests toward Alderwick Hall." Sir Thomas protested. "You'll create panic, then call it a change in program." Roderick's voice left no room for further debate. "Do it." The steward ran. Catherine moved toward the mill path. Roderick followed. "The manual release is on the secondary channel," she said. "If we open it now, the ornamental meadow will take the first surge." He understood at once. The tents, the cottages or the tents. The cottages. The answer came without hesitation. Something inside Catherine shifted, but there was no time to examine it. They reached the mill yard as Amos came running from the lower platform. "The main gate's binding, Your Grace. The chain won't settle." "Can you free it?" Roderick asked. Amos looked at Catherine. "Not before the water rises another foot. Then we use the emergency channel," she said. Pritchard was already at the release housing with 2 labourers. The lock had been forced inward and packed with metal filings. Catherine knelt beside it. The handle won't turn while the lower catch is engaged. The catch is under the platform, Amos said. Half underwater already. Roderick pulled off his gloves. Show me. Catherine caught his sleeve. No, you move the guests from the bridge. Catherine. If the channel opens, the first water crosses beneath that bridge. Clear it. He looked toward the lower platform, then back at her. His instinct to remain was visible. So was the effort required to obey. What do you need? Amos, Pritchard, and a crowbar. Nothing else. Roderick nodded once and turned away. You heard the Duchess. Clear the bridge. Catherine descended the wet steps with Amos. The river churned below the boards, brown and fast. Pritchard braced the release housing, while Catherine found the lower catch with the end of the crowbar. It had been wired shut. This wasn't weather, Amos said. No. Catherine pressed harder. The wire snapped loose. Above them, a shout rose from the meadow. Water had begun spilling over the lower bank. Guests moved toward the footbridge in confusion, exactly where Roderick had ordered them not to go. His voice carried above the noise. Upper road, now. Leave the baskets and move. Catherine turned the release handle. It resisted. She put both hands against it. Again, Pritchard said. Amos joined her. The iron wheel moved 1 inch, then stopped. The main sluice groaned. From somewhere inside the mechanism came a slow metallic drag. W17. The weight's holding the closure, Catherine said. We need the secondary gate fully open. She shifted her grip. On 3. They pushed together. The handle turned. A deep shudder passed through the channel. Water struck the lower gate and burst through the newly opened cut. The force swept across the ornamental meadow in a widening sheet. Marquee ropes snapped loose. Tables overturned. A decorative bridge sagged at one end and dropped into the mud. The current rushed away from the cottages. Catherine held the wheel until the channel settled into its full course. When she climbed back to the yard, rain had begun. The fete ground was a confusion of soaked fabric, abandoned chairs, and startled horses being led uphill. No one had been swept away. One groom sat beneath an awning with his ankle wrapped after pulling a horse clear of the sinking bridge. The cottages still stood beyond the bank. Millicent waited near the release housing, pale but composed. In her raised hand was the missing cobalt tally. This was found beside the emergency wheel, she announced. The nearest guests turned. Godfrey held the false maintenance order. Her Grace brought the marker from Briarcombe, he said. She opened the channel without committee authority, after personally ordering W17 installed. Shock moved through the crowd faster than the water. Catherine stood in the mud with rain on her face and did not lower her eyes. Sir Thomas looked from the flooded lawn to the cottages. Did you cause this? I chose where the water would go, Catherine said. If I had not opened the channel, it would have gone through those homes. Godfrey lifted the order, and if she had not altered the mechanism, there might have been no danger at all. Roderick stepped between Catherine and the committee. Enough. Millicent's expression changed. Roderick, the evidence. The evidence is that the cottages remain standing because the Duchess acted while this committee debated grass. He turned so the entire crowd could hear him. She did not create the danger. She decided where its cost would fall. Catherine looked at him. He had defended her publicly, but the false order still existed. The tally still rested in Millicent's hand. The truth had not yet caught up with the accusation. She stepped past Roderick. I will answer every question, she said, but not before the injured are tended, the horses are secured, and the lower cottages are checked. The firmness of her voice steadied the nearest workers. Amos moved first, then Pritchard. Roderick ordered the guests to Alderwick Hall and sent the estate physician to the groom. For one brief moment, authority aligned with competence. By nightfall, the water had begun to recede. Catherine returned to Briarcombe exhausted, mud dried along the hem of her gown. She had barely removed her gloves when a messenger arrived from Alderwick. A wagon had been stopped near the west gate. Inside lay a cast-iron counterweight marked W17. The wagon bore the seal of Briarcombe Dower House. Someone had not merely planted a tally beside Catherine's hand. Someone had prepared an entire piece of machinery to make it appear that the Duchess had hidden the danger herself. The wagon stood beneath the west gate lanterns with Briarcombe's seal fixed to its side in fresh red wax. Rain tapped against the canvas cover. Beneath it lay a black counterweight marked W17, heavy enough to require 2 men and a chain hoist to move. Roderick arrived before midnight with Pritchard, Amos, and the estate solicitor. Catherine came from Briarcombe in Lady Marjorie's carriage, wearing the same plain wool gown she had used at the mill. She had not changed because there had been no time, and because the mud along her hem was evidence of where she had truly spent the day. Millicent waited beneath the gate arch with Godfrey and 2 members of the Agricultural Committee. Her expression held sorrow, polished into usefulness. This was stopped less than a mile from Alderwick, she said. The driver claims he was paid to move it before dawn. Catherine looked at the wagon. By whom? He says he never saw the gentleman's face. Godfrey gestured toward the seal. But he saw this. Lady Marjorie's crest had been pressed into the wax, not perfectly. The outer leaf curled the wrong direction. Catherine stepped closer. That is not Briarcombe's seal. Sir Thomas Vale frowned. It appears to be. It is copied. Catherine touched the edge without breaking it. Lady Marjorie's seal has a chip beneath the left branch. This does not. Millicent's brows lifted. How fortunate that only you can identify the flaw. Her solicitor can identify it. So can the maker who repaired it last year. Godfrey folded his arms, or the entire explanation could have been prepared before the wagon was found. Roderick did not look at him. Remove the cover. The men pulled back the canvas. The weight looked convincing in the lantern light. Its cast-iron surface had been darkened with oil. A blue enamel marker had been fixed to the face. Pritchard examined the housing and ran a measuring rule along the edge. It's the same size as the mill weight. Catherine moved beside him. Not the same depth. He measured again. You're right. Amos tapped the metal with the wooden handle of a tool. The sound came back wrong, too light. Hollow, he said. One of the committee men shifted uneasily. Godfrey's expression remained calm. A replica, then. That hardly clears Catherine. Her Grace, Roderick said. The correction was quiet. Godfrey ignored it. A hollow weight would be easier to transport, easier to conceal, easier to plant. Catherine looked at him, easier to use for a false reading. The meaning came together at once. A hollow shell could be filled or emptied. It could be made to appear heavy, then altered before inspection. It could support any story the villains needed. Roderick turned to the wagon driver, who stood under guard near the wall. Who paid you? A man at the Eastern Turnpike, Your Grace. He gave me the route and said the load belonged to Briarcombe. Did he use Lady Marjorie's name? No, only the house. What did he look like? Tall, grey coat, clay on his boots. Amos looked at Catherine. Grey clay. The same trace linked to the new icehouse foundation at Alderwick. Godfrey's mouth tightened. Millicent saw it and spoke quickly. The ice house is used by half the household. This proves nothing. Roderick looked at the weight again. It proves enough to remove the wagon from public view and secure every component. Catherine's attention shifted toward the river. Even at this distance, she could hear the low rush beyond the fields. Rain had returned, steady and cold. The manual releases must remain open tonight. Roderick answered without hesitation. They will. Godfrey stepped forward. After what happened today, allowing anyone near the controls would be reckless. The meadow flooded because the emergency channel worked, Catherine said. The cottages remained dry because I opened it, and now a weight-bearing Briarcomb's seal appears on Westleigh land, a false seal. That is what you claim. Sir Thomas looked between them. Until this is resolved, perhaps every sluice should be locked and guarded. Catherine turned toward him. That would remove the only emergency route if the river rises again. It would prevent further interference. It would prevent intervention. Roderick's expression changed. Fear had entered the room disguised as order. Catherine recognized it before he spoke. We lock the controls until morning, he said. She stared at him. No. Catherine, another storm is moving, south. Which is why the releases must remain usable. No one touches them until every mechanism has been inspected. You cannot inspect a river into waiting. I cannot allow a second act of sabotage. Then place trusted men at the gates. Trusted by whom? The question came too quickly. It was not accusation. It was worse. It was doubt born from panic. Catherine felt the old wound open beneath the new one. By the people who know the machinery. The people who know the machinery are already divided, because someone divided them. And until I know who, I will not permit access. Catherine stepped closer. If you lock the manual releases and the main gate binds, the cottages will have no relief channel. I will post guards. Guards cannot open a mechanism you have ordered sealed. Then they will break the locks if needed. After whose permission? Roderick's silence answered. His, always his. Catherine lowered her voice. You are choosing control because you are afraid. I am choosing caution because lives may be at risk. Lives are already at risk. I will not gamble them on incomplete evidence. You gambled them yesterday when you waited for the committee. The words struck him. Everyone heard them. Millicent looked down to conceal satisfaction. Roderick's face hardened, not with anger, but with the effort not to retreat into rank. The gates will be secured tonight. Catherine looked at him for a long moment. Then do not use my name when the water rises. She turned to Pritchard. Record that I objected. Record the time. Record the river level. Pritchard nodded. I will, Your Grace. Catherine left beneath the gate lanterns without waiting for Roderick to stop her. He did not. That hurt more than she expected, though she knew pursuit would only have repeated the problem in another form. At Briarcombe, she remained awake with the field map spread across Lady Marjorie's table. Rain struck the windows. Anne brought tea no one drank. Near 2 a.m, hoofbeats sounded in the drive. A messenger from Alderwick entered, soaked to the shoulders. The seal on the wagon was cut from an old grain crate behind Briarcomb's south barn. He said, Mr. Hale found the missing corner. Lady Marjorie's mouth thinned. So they stole wood bearing my mark. Catherine asked, and the weight? Mr. Pritchard opened it. Hollow shell. Sand packed inside removable panels. The deception was now visible. Roderick had enough proof to know the wagon had been planted. It did not erase his order. Another messenger arrived less than an hour later. This one carried a note in Roderick's hand. The locks had been removed. The manual releases were open. Guards had been reassigned to the cottage road and mill bridge. He had signed the revised order publicly before Sir Thomas and the committee members. Catherine read the message once. "He corrected it," Anne said softly. "Yes. Will you go back?" "Not tonight," Catherine folded the note. "He must learn that correction does not erase consequence." At Alderwick, Roderick stood in the rain beside the secondary sluice. While workers broke the final seal from the release arm, he had not sent another letter. He had wanted to ride to Briarcombe and explain that the order had come from fear, not distrust. The distinction no longer seemed worthy of defense. Fear had done the same damage. Amos approached with a lantern. "The lower road is clear, Your Grace, and the cottages safe for now." Pritchard came from the wagon shed, carrying the Hollow Waits blue enamel plate. "There's something else." He turned it over. Beneath the paint, a shallow groove had been cut around the back, wide enough to hold sand before sealing. It was made for adjustment. Roderick looked toward the dark river. "To alter the reading during a demonstration." That's what Her Grace said. Roderick closed his eyes briefly. Yes. By dawn, the rain had softened. The channels remained open. No cottage flooded. At Briarcombe, Catherine received a leather folder delivered by the Westleigh solicitor. Inside lay a formal delegation bearing Roderick's seal. It granted Catherine full emergency authority over every sluice, gate, channel, and flood decision on Westleigh land, effective immediately and regardless of residence. There was no request for her return, no mention of forgiveness. Only one line in Roderick's hand beneath the legal text. "I should have trusted your judgment before the river proved it for you." Catherine read the delegation 3 times before she believed what it did not ask of her. It did not require her return to Westleigh House. It did not make her authority dependent upon Roderick's approval in each emergency. It did not confine her work to daylight, committee consent, or the presence of a male advisor. The document granted her full control over the sluices, overflow channels, floodgates, and emergency labor on Westleigh land whenever water conditions demanded it. The language had been written by a solicitor. The choice behind it belonged to Roderick. Lady Marjorie stood across the breakfast table with one hand resting on the back of a chair. "Well," Catherine lowered the paper. "He has given me everything I asked for." "That was not my question." Catherine looked again at the final handwritten line. "I should have trusted your judgment before the river proved it for you." "He has given it without asking me to come home." Marjorie's expression softened only slightly. "That is more difficult than giving it as a gift." "Why?" "Because a gift may be taken back when gratitude disappoints the giver. A right acknowledged is harder to reclaim." Catherine folded the document and placed it beside the cobalt sketch she had made before the tally was stolen. She had spent years wishing Roderick would see her work. Now that he had begun to see it, she feared how easily hope might disguise itself as forgiveness. "I need to know whether he means this when other men are watching," she said. Marjorie nodded. "Then ask him where it will cost him most." Roderick arrived at Briarcombe shortly after noon. He had sent notice ahead and waited in the hall until Lady Marjorie agreed to receive him. Catherine found him standing beside the drawing-room window, rainlight sharpening the tired lines around his eyes. He bowed to Marjorie, then to Catherine. He did not move closer. "You received the delegation." "I did. Is anything in it unclear?" "Only whether you will honor it." His gaze held hers. "I signed it." "You signed orders to lock the gates as well." The words landed cleanly. Roderick did not defend himself. Yes. Lady Marjorie took a chair near the fire and opened a book she did not intend to read. Her presence preserved propriety and denied privacy without intruding upon the conversation. Catherine remained standing. If another emergency occurs in front of the Agricultural Committee, and I give an order that contradicts yours, whose order will be followed? Yours. If Sir Thomas calls that humiliating, then he may endure the humiliation. If Godfrey claims I am acting from spite, he will be required to produce evidence. If Millicent says the duchy appears weak because its duke is obeying his wife, something passed through Roderick's face. Not anger, recognition. Then I will tell her that weakness was ignoring the person who understood the danger. Catherine watched him carefully. And if I never return to Westleigh House? He did not answer at once. This time, the pause did not feel like the one at dinner. He was not choosing the safer response. He was choosing the honest one. The authority remains yours. Even if our marriage does not, it is not a courtship gift. His voice was low. It is not payment for forgiveness. You earned it before I acknowledged it. Catherine looked down at the document. The paper did not tremble in her hand, but something inside her did. Why now? Because I used to believe responsibility meant keeping every decision within reach. He glanced toward the rain-dark garden. When I did not understand a danger, I tightened my hold. I called that protection. And now I know a closed hand cannot receive instruction. The answer was imperfect. It was also his. Catherine moved to the table where the brass nameplate lay wrapped in cloth. Roderick had brought it with him. The scratches remained visible across the surface. This still carries the damage, she said. I have ordered a new plate. With whose name? Yours. Only mine, he looked surprised. The design was yours. The workers built it. Pritchard corrected the mechanism. Amos understood the mill's behavior before any committee member did. Roderick nodded. Then all names that belong there will be included. Catherine looked at him. You did not ask whether that would make the plate too crowded. I have begun to distrust empty space. A breath of warmth moved through her before she could stop it. Not forgiveness, not yet, but the memory of why she had once loved him. Roderick reached inside his coat and removed a small leather case. Catherine's pulse changed. He placed it on the table without opening it. The wedding ring is not inside, he said. She had not realized how tightly she had been holding herself until her shoulders eased. Where is it? With me. Why? Because returning it now would turn this meeting into a bargain. He looked directly at her. I will not ask you to wear it while your name is still under accusation. Catherine's fingers rested on the edge of the delegation. And when my name is cleared, then it will still be your decision. He opened the leather case. Inside lay the restored brass plate, not yet engraved. This is all I brought to return. Catherine touched the clean surface. The metal was warm from his coat. We need more than a corrected plate, she said. We need to prove how the false weight was meant to work. Roderick took a seat only after she did. Lady Marjorie turned a page. Catherine spread her sketches across the table. The hollow replica can be filled with sand that changes its weight without changing its shape. To mislead an inspection. Yes, if the shell is filled during one test and emptied before another, the readings appear inconsistent. The person blamed looks incompetent. You, or Pritchard, or Amos, depending on which story became useful. Roderick studied the drawing, and the original W17, still missing. The wagon weight was not it. No, the true casting must be somewhere Godfrey can access without attracting notice. Catherine traced the old supply route on the map. The ice house has grey foundation clay, the same clay Amos saw on the man who followed him. The weight may be hidden there, perhaps, but finding it privately will not be enough. Godfrey will say it was planted. Millicent will say the documents were misunderstood. Roderick leaned back. "What do you propose?" Catherine looked at the brass model, a reconstruction. "Public, before the same committee that accepted the false order. We use the original and the replica. We mark the chain. We record the water level. Amos repeats the maintenance sequence. Pritchard verifies every measurement. And I?" The question mattered. Catherine let the silence hold for a moment. "You will stand where I place you." Roderick did not smile. "And follow your instruction, even if the room turns against me. Yes, even if the result damages Westleigh. Truth will damage Westleigh less than another lie." Catherine looked toward Lady Marjorie. The older woman did not lift her eyes, but the smallest movement of approval touched her mouth. "Then we proceed," Catherine said, "not as husband and wife." Roderick's gaze did not leave hers. "As what?" "As the person responsible for the waterworks, and the man responsible for making sure no one prevents her from proving the truth." Something softened in his expression. "I can accept that." Catherine gathered the papers into order. For the first time since leaving Westleigh House, she did not feel that cooperation required surrender. Roderick rose to go, then paused beside the table. "If your plan leads you farther from me, I will still follow it." She met his eyes. "See that you do." He bowed and left without asking for more. An hour later, a letter arrived at Briarcombe in Millicent's hand. The message contained only 3 lines. "I know where the original W17 is hidden. I will return it if you agree to meet me alone. In exchange, you will remain silent about who removed your name from the model." Catherine read the letter once, then carried it to Lady Marjorie. "She thinks I still want my name badly enough to trade someone else's safety for it." Marjorie closed her book. "Do you?" Catherine looked toward the window where the river moved beyond the trees, high but contained. "No." She folded Millicent's letter and placed it beside the delegation. "But I do want to know where she expects me to go." Millicent chose the conservatory at Briarcombe because it looked private without being improper. Glass walls held the pale afternoon light, and every word spoken inside could be seen from the morning room, where Lady Marjorie sat with the door open and a book resting unread in her lap. Catherine had answered the letter on her own terms. She would meet Millicent. She would not meet her alone. Millicent arrived in a dark green carriage with no Westleigh crest and stepped inside, carrying a small velvet bag. Her expression was composed, but the fingers holding the bag were too tight. "You've become cautious," she said. Catherine remained beside the long table of wintering plants. "No, I've become unwilling to make secrecy convenient for other people." Millicent glanced toward the open door. "Lady Marjorie does not trust me. Lady Marjorie trusts evidence." "How fortunate for you." Catherine did not take the bait. "You said you know where the original W17 is hidden." Millicent set the velvet bag on the table. "Before we discuss that, I want one thing understood. Godfrey designed the sabotage. He altered the mechanism. He falsified the maintenance sequence. I did not. You removed my name from the brass plate. Yes, you stole the cobalt tally from Briarcombe." Millicent's eyes shifted. "I recovered what belonged to Westleigh. You planted it beside the release wheel. I placed it where the committee would see that you had been involved. That is called planting evidence. Do not make me vulgar by naming things too plainly. Catherine almost smiled. Plain names are difficult to manipulate. Millicent moved to the nearest glass pane and looked out toward the bare garden. You think this began because I envied you, did it? Not in the way you imagine. She turned. I managed Westleigh before you arrived. I knew the household, the tenants, the families who mattered. The committees Roderick had to please. I kept the duchy from looking weak while he spent months in London. Then you came with your notebooks and your questions, and everyone indulged you because you were his wife. Catherine kept her voice level. No one indulged me. You were allowed to wander fields and advise men who had worked there all their lives. I listened to those men, and they praised you for it. A duchess who remembered cottage names, a duchess who noticed flood marks, a duchess who made duty look gentle. Millicent's mouth tightened. You took influence without admitting you wanted it. I wanted the cottages dry. You wanted to matter. Catherine let the truth of that pass through her without shame. Yes, I did. Millicent looked surprised. Catherine stepped closer to the table. Wanting one's work acknowledged is not corruption. It becomes dangerous when it embarrasses the men responsible for the estate. Then perhaps the men should do better work. Millicent's composure cracked for one brief second. You see? That tone, that quiet certainty. You made Roderick look negligent merely by noticing what he had missed. He was negligent, and Godfrey saw an opportunity. The design could be sold to other estates if it carried a man's name. Your notes were useful. Your authorship was not. There it was, not merely jealousy, profit. Catherine looked at the velvet bag. What is inside? Millicent placed one hand over it. A key to the old ice house near the mill yard. The original weight is there, yes. And you will give me the key if I remain silent about the plate. About the plate, the tally, and my role in the committee, papers. In exchange, Godfrey bears everything. He planned the dangerous parts. You made them believable. Millicent's face hardened. I protected Westleigh from ridicule. You protected your place inside it. There is no difference for a woman like me. Catherine looked at her carefully. There is always a difference between survival and choosing who pays for it. Millicent pushed the velvet bag toward her. Take the key. Give the committee the weight. Blame Godfrey. Your name will be restored. Roderick will beg you to return. Everyone receives what they want. Catherine did not touch the bag. The surveyor loses his reputation. He is replaceable. Amos carries the suspicion. He is a tenant, and you think that makes him expendable. I think Westleigh cannot be saved by sentiment. Catherine heard the same logic that had shaped her marriage. Rank above voice, appearance above truth, control above trust. She drew the velvet bag toward her, opened it, and found a small iron key inside. I will take this. Millicent exhaled. Then we understand one another. No, we understand you. Catherine looked toward the morning room door. Lady Marjorie, please ask Mr. Hale to come in. Millicent went still. Hale entered, with the Briarcombe steward and Roderick's solicitor behind him. Both had heard enough. Catherine placed the key in the solicitor's hand. Record that Lady Millicent Vane offered this key in exchange for silence about evidence she removed and planted. Millicent's face lost color. You deceived me. I required a witness. You will regret humiliating me. You mistook accountability for humiliation long before I entered this room. Millicent gathered her gloves. Godfrey will deny everything. Then he may do so before the machinery. Catherine watched her leave without haste, but the carriage departed too quickly for dignity. Lady Marjorie closed her book. You did not ask where in the icehouse. Catherine looked at the key. She expected me to know. The old icehouse stood less than 200 yards from the mill yard, half buried in a bank beneath yew trees. Grey clay marked the recent repair along its lower wall. Catherine arrived with Roderick, Pritchard, Amos, Hale, and the solicitor before dusk. Roderick had listened to the account of Millicent's offer without interrupting. He asked only one question. "What do you need me to do?" Catherine gave him the answer she had prepared. Keep Godfrey away from the site. Secure every component. Do not touch anything until Pritchard has recorded where it lies. And after that, stand where I place you when we reconstruct the system. His gaze held hers. When do I move? When I ask. Then I'll wait. The key opened the inner iron door. Cold air carried the smell of damp stone and straw. Lantern light revealed old crates, broken tools, and a long object beneath sacking at the back wall. Pritchard removed the covering. The original W-17 lay on a wooden cradle, solid cast iron, its surface marked by grease and blue enamel dust. A cloth was wrapped around one end. Catherine lifted it carefully. The monogram GH had been stitched into the corner. Godfrey had hidden the mechanism under his own linen. Amos gave a low breath. That's the true weight. Pritchard measured the depth and pivot position, and the altered balance. Catherine looked at Roderick. We have the object. We still need the method. A public reconstruction, he said, before the committee, landowners, workers, and tenant representatives. Yes. She turned to the solicitor. Issue invitations as witnesses, not guests. State that the demonstration concerns the safety of the Westleigh waterworks. To Pritchard, she said, prepare the original weight and the hollow replica. Mark both without changing them. Record every chain link, every catch, and every pin. To Amos, write the maintenance sequence as you performed it before W-17 arrived. Amos nodded. I will. Catherine moved to the doorway. The brass model must be present. So must the restored plate. Roderick said, your name will be engraved before the demonstration. Not only mine. Add Pritchard. Add Amos Bell. Add the workman who built the channel. It will be done. Outside, the river moved darkly beyond the trees. Catherine opened her field book on the carriage seat and began listing the reconstruction steps. Original weight, hollow shell, marked chain, water level, boards, release timing, witness positions, safety screen. Roderick watched her write. He did not ask to see the page until she handed it to him. You stand at the main wheel, she said. You do not touch it until I give the order. Understood. If Godfrey provokes you, you do not leave your place. Understood. If the committee doubts me, you do not answer unless I ask. That cost him more. She saw it. Understood. Catherine closed the book. For the first time, she was not asking for a place inside the system. She was designing the system in which truth would be allowed to speak. Behind them, Pritchard called from the icehouse. He had found a small iron pin beneath the cradle, polished on one side and rough on the other. Catherine took it into the lantern light. A shallow cut ran nearly through the metal. It was not part of the original mechanism. Someone had prepared one final failure. The iron pin lay across Catherine's palm like an accusation. One side had been polished smooth, where it would fit inside the main wheel assembly. The other carried a deliberate cut, shallow enough to escape a casual glance, and deep enough to fail under strain. Pritchard held the lantern closer. That was meant to break under load. Amos looked toward the mill yard. At the demonstration? Yes, Catherine said, and whoever stood at the wheel would be blamed for using it improperly. Roderick's gaze moved from the pin to her. You placed me at the wheel. I did. Then, this was meant for me, or for whoever obeyed my instruction. Catherine closed her fingers around the metal. The thought did not frighten her as much as it clarified the villain's purpose. Godfrey had not merely wanted to discredit her calculations. He wanted the reconstruction to fail in public, with Roderick at the center of it, so that Catherine's judgment appeared dangerous even when the Duke trusted it. Pritchard examined the cut again. If the wheel slipped suddenly, the arm could swing. Then we do not use this pin, Roderick said. We cancel the demonstration. Catherine looked at him. No, Catherine, this has moved beyond reputation. It moved beyond reputation when the cottages were placed at risk. I will not let you proceed with a mechanism prepared to fail, nor will I ask anyone to. She took the duplicate safety pin from Pritchard's tool case and set it beside the damaged one. We replace it. We reduce the water load. We place a timber screen between the wheel and the witnesses. We mark every part before anyone enters the yard. Roderick's expression remained hard. Godfrey may have altered something else, which is why we inspect everything before dawn. And if we miss one piece, then we stop. Catherine's voice softened, not in surrender, but in precision. The trust I asked from you does not require recklessness. It requires that you do not seize command simply because fear has returned. He went still. The words reached the wound beneath his authority. Roderick looked toward the dark outline of the mill. I thought standing at the wheel was how I proved I trusted you. No, you prove it by standing where I place you, and by accepting when I change the plan. He looked back at her. Then, change it. Catherine nodded to Pritchard. Fit the duplicate pin. Record the damaged one. Build a screen 3 feet beyond the wheel. Limit the gate to a quarter load. No worker stands inside the marked line. To Amos, she said, walk the chain from the first link to the lower catch. Do not assume any piece is unchanged. Amos took the lantern. I'll begin now. Roderick remained beside Catherine as the others moved. You are protecting me, he said. I am protecting the reconstruction. You could have said no. No would not have been true. She met his eyes. You are part of the plan. That does not make you the plan. A faint breath left him, almost a laugh, and not quite one. I am learning the distinction. They worked through the night. Every chain link was chalked and recorded. Pritchard weighed the solid W17 and the hollow replica twice, once with the sand panels filled and once empty. Amos demonstrated the original maintenance sequence without touching the controls. Hale and the solicitor sealed the icehouse evidence in separate crates. The mill workers erected a low timber barrier to keep witnesses back from the mechanism. Before sunrise, Catherine walked the entire route alone with Anne several steps behind her. Main wheel, lower catch, counterweight chain, secondary gate, flood marker, cottage channel. Every part had been measured. Every danger had been reduced. Nothing depended upon memory alone. When she returned to the yard, Roderick stood beside the brass model, which had been brought beneath a covered awning. The new plate had arrived from the engraver. It read, designed from the water tables and field surveys of Catherine, Duchess of Westleigh, with mechanical consultation by Mr. Samuel Pritchard and mill observations by Amos Bell. Beneath that line appeared the names of the foreman and 4 workmen who had built the channels. Catherine touched the edge of the plate. You added everyone whose work was used. You did not add yourself. I did not design it. The answer was simple. She felt its weight anyway. Roderick fastened the plate to the model with fresh brass screws. The old screws were found in Millicent's traveling case, he said. Catherine looked at him. Where is she? Preparing to leave, Alderwick. Has she been told she must remain for the demonstration? The solicitor informed her that estate property is under formal inquiry. Did you order her carriage stopped? No. Catherine watched him closely. Why not? Because I do not want force to replace evidence. He tightened the last screw. If she leaves, the solicitor will record it. If she remains, she will answer. Catherine saw the restraint in the choice. Old Roderick would have closed the gates and called it protection. This Roderick let consequence approach without pretending possession was justice. And Godfrey? She asked. He arrived an hour ago. He claims he came to clear his name. He came to see whether the pin breaks. Then he will be disappointed. A worker approached, carrying the damaged pin in a sealed cloth. Your Grace, the saw marks match the fine-toothed tool from Sir Godfrey's travelling case. Catherine turned. Was the tool marked? Yes, Your Grace. G.H. Beneath the handle. Roderick's jaw tightened. Keep both together under the solicitor's seal. The worker bowed and left. Dawn spread grey light over the yard. Carriages began arriving along the upper road. Sir Thomas Vale came first with 2 committee members. Behind them were county landowners, tenant representatives, and several guests who had witnessed the flood. Amos' wife stood near the mill cottage with other families from the lower bank. Catherine had insisted they be invited. The truth concerned their homes before it concerned any title. Godfrey entered the yard in a dark coat, composed and almost cheerful. He glanced at the restored plate, then at the solid W17 beneath the awning. His expression changed for less than a second. Millicent arrived separately. She wore pale grey and carried no reticule. Her eyes moved at once to the brass model. When she saw Catherine's name restored, something cold settled across her face. Sir Thomas approached the safety line. Duchess, I trust this demonstration will be brief. It will be clear, Catherine said. Brevity depends upon whether anyone interrupts it. Godfrey smiled. Surely questions are permitted, after each stage is recorded. He looked toward Roderick. You intend to let her direct the entire proceeding? Roderick took his assigned position beside the main wheel. I intend to follow the person who understands it. A murmur moved through the witnesses. Godfrey's smile thinned. Catherine climbed onto the raised platform where the original and hollow weights rested side by side. She waited until every conversation stopped. You have been told that W17 was an ordinary revision, she began. You have been told that I ordered it installed, then caused a flood to prove my own warning. Today, the machinery will answer those claims. She signaled to Pritchard, who opened the record book. Amos stood beside the chain. Roderick placed one hand on the wheel, but did not move it. Godfrey's eyes followed that hand. Catherine noticed. So did Millicent. No one touches a control until instructed, Catherine said. Her gaze passed over the entire yard and returned to Roderick. Not even his Grace. He met her eyes. Understood. Catherine nodded to Pritchard. Begin with the weights. The first scale was brought forward. The solid W17 settled onto it with a heavy thud. The hollow replica followed. Sand shifted inside its concealed panels. Several witnesses leaned closer. Godfrey did not. He watched the wheel. Catherine felt the air tighten around the next step. The villains still believed something would fail. They did not yet know the damaged pin had been found. She stepped down from the platform and took her place beside the marked chain. Mr. Bell, prepare the maintenance sequence. Mr. Pritchard, record the water level. Your Grace, hold the wheel exactly where it is. Roderick's fingers remained still. Godfrey smiled again, too soon. Beyond the timber screen, the river pressed against the closed gate. Catherine raised her hand. Not yet. Everyone waited. Then, from beneath the lower platform, came the faint scrape of metal against metal. Someone had touched the hidden catch. The scrape came again from beneath the lower platform. Catherine did not lower her hand. "No one moves," she said. Amos froze beside the chain. Pritchard bent over the record book. Roderick kept one hand on the wheel and the other at his side. Then Millicent spoke from behind the safety line. "Godfrey, release the lower catch before the pressure builds." The words fell into the yard with the force of a confession. Godfrey turned toward her so sharply that his composure vanished. "Be quiet." Millicent's face changed. She had spoken from habit, not caution. Catherine looked at the witnesses. Sir Thomas Vale had gone still. The solicitor closed his hand over the sealed evidence packet. Amos stepped toward the platform edge. "The lower catch is hidden," he said. "Only someone who worked the altered sequence would know it had to be released first." Godfrey recovered enough to smile, or someone who heard the Duchess explain it. Catherine's voice remained calm. "I never explained the hidden catch in Millicent's presence. You cannot prove that. No, the machinery will." She nodded to Pritchard. "Record the interruption and the exact words used." His pencil moved at once. Catherine looked beneath the platform. A workman stationed near the lower channel raised his lantern. The hidden catch had shifted half an inch. Someone had tried to move it from the far side using a hooked rod. The rod lay in the mud, abandoned when Millicent spoke. Catherine turned to Godfrey. "You expected the damaged pin to fail when His Grace turned the wheel. When it did not, you tried the lower catch. That is absurd. Then remain where you are." She faced the scale. "Proceed." Pritchard called out the weight of the solid W17. Amos repeated it. The solicitor recorded it. Then they opened the concealed panels of the hollow replica. Sand poured into a marked tray. The shell became nearly 50 pounds lighter without any change in appearance. A murmur moved through the witnesses. Catherine lifted the cracked cobalt tally. This marker was attached to the substituted chain. Its crescent break matches the enamel fragment found in the link housing. Pritchard held up the fragment in a small glass vial. The edges aligned exactly. Godfrey's smile disappeared. Catherine turned to Amos. "Show the maintenance sequence as it stood before W17. Amos moved through the steps without touching the wheel. Open secondary channel. Check lower catch. Test primary chain. Confirm gate response. Record water level. Then Catherine had the solid W17 connected under reduced load. Pritchard marked the chain with white chalk. "Water level," she said. 4 feet, 8 inches, he answered. "Your Grace, hold the wheel." Roderick's hand tightened slightly, but he did not move. Mr. Bell released the first control. Amos obeyed. The gate shifted. The added weight dragged the chain. The primary sluice answered late. Everyone heard it, a slow iron complaint followed by a heavy pause. Catherine watched the chalk mark. Count. Amos began. 1, 2, 3, 4. The gate closed. Without W17, it should have taken less than 2 seconds. Catherine signaled Pritchard. Record 4. Then she had the hollow replica connected with its sand panels emptied. They repeated the sequence. The gate moved faster. Pritchard read the level again. The difference appeared ordinary until the 2 timings were placed side by side. 1 mechanism, 2 results. 1 visible shell, 2 hidden weights. "This is how the readings were meant to be altered," Catherine said. A filled shell for one inspection, an emptied shell for another. The same marked component would appear inconsistent. Whoever questioned it could be called mistaken. Sir Thomas looked toward Godfrey. And the false maintenance order. Catherine nodded to Amos. He held up the original blank acknowledgement sheet from the wage office ledger, which Pritchard had found filed beneath unrelated accounts. The signature line matched the copied document. The ink above it did not. The upper text was added later, Pritchard said. The spacing crosses the old fold. The ink is from a different bottle. Godfrey's control cracked. You are taking the word of a tenant and a surveyor, who both stand to keep their positions. Their positions were threatened because they refused to carry your blame, Catherine said. That gives them risk, not advantage. Millicent stepped backward from the line. I had nothing to do with the weight. Catherine turned to her. You removed my name from the model. To protect Westleigh, you stole the tally from Briarcombe. Millicent said nothing. You placed it beside the emergency wheel. Silence. And you offered the icehouse key in exchange for my silence. The solicitor opened his notebook. That offer was witnessed. Millicent looked toward Roderick. I was trying to contain the scandal. Roderick's expression was unreadable. You created it. I protected your house by endangering its tenants and discrediting its duchess. She was making you look weak. Catherine felt every eye turn toward Roderick. He released the wheel only after she nodded. Then he stepped forward, not between her and the crowd, but beside the marked line she had drawn. No, he said, I looked weak because I used rank where judgment was required. His voice carried across the yard. I dismissed the person who understood the danger because her warning inconvenienced my pride. I allowed her name to be removed from work that was hers. I let suspicion become a sentence because I preferred certainty to listening. No one moved. Roderick looked at Catherine, but he did not ask for anything. The cottages stood because she acted. This demonstration succeeded because she led it. Her authority over the Westleigh waterworks remains in force, whether or not she ever returns to my house. Catherine's breath caught, not because the words were romantic, but because they cost him exactly what he had once protected most, appearances. Godfrey laughed once, sharply. You would surrender the duchy to sentiment, Catherine faced him. No, the duchy is being returned to evidence. She nodded to the solicitor. He stepped forward and read the consequences already prepared under Roderick's seal. Godfrey's contract was terminated. All payments connected to the altered works were frozen. His interest in future estate improvements was cancelled. The evidence of property sabotage, forged instructions, witness intimidation, and deliberate risks would be sent to the county magistrate. Any profit from the scheme would be used first to repair the cottages, the meadow, and the mill. Godfrey's face went pale. Roderick, we are family. You used that fact as access, Roderick said, not as loyalty. The solicitor then addressed Millicent. She was removed from every Westleigh household function. She no longer represented the duchy in charitable, social, or estate matters. Any funds received through Godfrey's contracts would be repaid. She would leave Alderwick under the supervision of Lady Marjorie's chosen companion, and remain with relatives in Bath until further proceedings were settled. Millicent looked at Catherine with naked fury. You have taken everything. Catherine held her gaze. No, I stopped you from taking more. Sir Thomas approached the model beneath the awning. The restored brass plate caught the morning light. He read the names in silence, then turned toward Catherine. The committee will issue a written correction. Include the workers, Catherine said, and Amos Bell, and Mr. Pritchard. It will be done. Also state that the emergency channel saved the cottages. Yes, the answer came without hesitation. Catherine looked toward the lower bank. The water moved steadily through the channel she had designed. No marquee stood there now. No applause rose. Only the sound of the river taking the safer path. Roderick remained beside the wheel. His hand rested near his waistcoat pocket, but he did not reach inside. Catherine knew what he carried there. He looked at her once. "The ring remains with me," he said quietly. "Not as a claim, only because I have no right to make this moment carry another demand." Catherine nodded. "Then do not." She turned back to the model as the new plate was fixed into place. Her name appeared first, but not alone. When the final screw tightened, the brass no longer held an absence. It held a record. Catherine watched the river pass beneath the gate and knew the truth had finally been given a shape no one could scrape away. 6 months passed before Catherine allowed herself to believe that Roderick's change would survive a season without witnesses. Winter came hard to Kent. Rain filled the upper fields, froze along the stone bridges, and returned in sudden thaws that tested every gate and channel at Westleigh. Catherine remained at Briarcombe. Her authority over the waterworks stayed in force. Roderick did not reduce it when the scandal quieted, when the newspapers lost interest, or when the county committee stopped sending formal apologies. He attended every inspection she called. He listened to Amos Bell before speaking. He read Pritchard's reports in full. When Catherine ordered the emergency meadow deepened by another foot, he approved the labor without presenting the idea as his own. The cottages below the mill were raised on new stone foundations. The groom injured during the flood received his full wages while he recovered and returned to work as assistant stable master. Amos became paid supervisor of the mill and lower sluices. Pritchard's name remained on the brass plate. So did the names of the workmen. Godfrey's contracts were dissolved, and the county magistrate took evidence concerning the forged instructions, the damaged mechanism, and the attempt to endanger estate property. His social standing disappeared before any formal judgment was reached. Men who had praised his vision now claimed they had always distrusted him. Catherine found no satisfaction in their cowardice. Millicent went to Bath under the supervision of a widowed cousin who possessed neither patience nor influence. She lost every Westleigh connection she had once used to enter committees, charities, and drawing rooms. The restitution, collected from Godfrey's accounts and Millicent's private transfers, paid for the repairs along the lower bank. Catherine required the records to be public. She wanted no one to call justice a private family arrangement. By March, the river had endured the full winter without entering a single cottage. That mattered more to Catherine than any apology. On a pale morning near the end of the month, she stood before a gathering of estate owners in a private hall at Maidstone and explained the Westleigh water tables. She spoke for 20 minutes. Amos demonstrated the release sequence. Pritchard answered the mechanical questions. When Sir Thomas praised Catherine alone, she corrected him. The design worked because the people who knew each part were permitted to speak. The sentence travelled through the room more quietly than praise, but farther. Afterward, 3 landowners asked Amos to advise their millers. Pritchard received an offer to review a drainage plan in Sussex. Catherine returned to Briarcombe before dusk and found Roderick waiting in the entrance hall. He had arrived without a grand carriage and without sending word far enough ahead for the household to prepare a formal reception. Yet He had not entered the drawing room. He stood beside the umbrella stand, with his gloves in one hand, and waited to be invited farther. Anne announced him. Catherine looked at the man who had once believed every room in Westleigh belonged to him by right. "You may come in," she said. Something moved in his expression at the words, but he did not answer with easy sentiment. He followed her into the morning room. Lady Marjorie was visiting a neighbour. Anne left the door open and remained within call. Roderick sat only after Catherine did. "I heard Maidstone went well," he said. "It went usefully." "That sounds more important." "It is." He smiled faintly. "I have brought something for you to review." He placed a folded document on the table. Catherine opened it. The solicitor had revised the Westleigh settlement. Her financial authority remained separate. No household representative could act in her name without written permission. Briarcombe would remain available to her as an independent residence for life. All major estate improvements affecting tenants required consultation with the Waterworks office, which Catherine now directed. "You did not need to include Briarcombe," she said. "Yes, I did. Why?" "Because I do not want your security to depend upon whether I am behaving well." The honesty of the answer held her still. Roderick folded his hands. "I know a document cannot repair what I did." "No, but it can prevent my better intentions from becoming your only protection." Catherine read the final page. There was no demand that she return to Westleigh House. No condition tied authority to marriage. "What are you asking?" He looked at her directly. "Not for the old marriage." The words were quiet. "That one was built upon silence, convenience, and my assumption that your patience had no limit." Catherine said nothing. He continued. "I am asking whether you would consider building another with me. One in which your work remains yours. One in which Briarcombe remains yours. One in which no relative, committee, or household officer stands between us, because I find listening uncomfortable. And if I disagree with you publicly, then I must answer publicly without using rank as a weapon. If I leave a room, I ask why, before I decide what your leaving means. If I tell you there is danger and everyone else says there is none," his voice changed, "I listen before the room agrees." That was the condition that mattered. Catherine placed the document on the table. "Words are easier in a quiet room." "Then judge me by the months behind them." She had. That was why he was here. Not because the county admired her now, not because the river had remained within its banks. Because Roderick had continued listening after there was no audience to reward him for it. "There is one place I want to see," she said. They rode to the restored spillway before sunset. Anne accompanied them in the second carriage and waited with the groom near the upper path. The river ran clear beneath the new gate. The ornamental meadow had been reshaped into a proper overflow basin, still rough with spring grass. The brass plate stood on a stone support beside the wheel. Catherine's name first, and not alone. Roderick stopped near the bank. He took a small leather box from inside his coat and held it out. He did not open it. Catherine accepted the box. The wedding ring lay inside, polished but unchanged. She lifted it between her fingers. For 7 years, it had represented a promise defined mostly by him. Then, it had represented her refusal to remain where she was not heard. Now it felt neither heavy nor light. It felt like a question. "If I wear it again," she said, "will you understand that I may still leave a room where my voice is dismissed?" Roderick did not reach for her hand. "Then I must make certain leaving is never the only way I listen." Catherine looked at him for a long moment. The river moved steadily through the channel. No crowd waited. No committee watched. There was no applause to confuse with truth. She slid the ring onto her own finger. Roderick's breath changed, but he did not seize the moment. "Thank you," he said. "Do not thank me yet." "No?" "The spring flow has not been tested." A smile reached his eyes. "Then I am at your command." They walked to the sluice wheel together. Catherine checked the level marker, the chain tension, and the lower catch. Roderick waited beside her, without touching the controls. "A quarter turn," she said. He placed his hand on the wheel only after she nodded. Together, they opened the spring flow. Water passed beneath the gate in a controlled silver current, spread into the restored channel, and moved safely away from the cottages. Catherine rested her hand on the iron rim. The wedding ring caught the fading light and reflected in the still water below. On the bank, the brass plate shone with every name that belonged there. Roderick stood beside her, not ahead of her, and waited for her next instruction.